All right, it's another edition of Blues Across Borders, the Zoom edition from Atlanta to Oswego, New York. What's that, about 1,000 miles, Kim?
I guess so. I'm certainly up here in the North Country in New York State, and I've been here about 30 odd years, so I must like it, I guess.
I'm the same way. I've been in Atlanta 30, 35, and it's a great spot because I can move from here and go anywhere pretty cheap and easy. So, but I know that this is fun to do because it really does cut across, and it's different from radio because people will hear us, but they'll have something to engage in from the visual point of view, which makes a difference, you know, so it's fun. But anyway, the main subject today is that lovely piece of red to your right. And the wonderful thing about this is why I suggested we just pop that in the corner there. There's something warm and inviting about their album cover. The red is great. I even wore my red rock and roll shirt today in its honor and in your honor, of course, because the album 41 from a band that you've led for 55 years with 60 proper musicians. How about that?
I know. So it's if I think about it, you know, even I don't know how you have a career so long. You know, I mean, very blessed, and you know, you have your ups and downs, but you keep going, and all of a sudden, you know, you've had a career that, you know, other people would cut their arm off for, you know, and so I'm very, very grateful and very, very lucky.
Well, you know, it's very impressive to me for one thing and one thing only, not just the only thing, but one specific thing is what I meant, is the stability of it, because I've talked to many guys in their 80s and 90s that are still going, and they said the music isn't the problem, and they said, being a band leader, it's like herding cats, but you've had it pretty easy, even though, like I said, you've had 60 proper musicians. And then on your left is a gold disc on the wall for which album?
That was for back in the Street Corner Talking days, you know, in the 70s. Yeah, well, I've been doing it for a long time. It was very, very difficult with personnel in the 60s. In the 70s, it has its own set of problems. You know, in the 60s, I was starting off, and nobody really quite realized the future of rock and roll. You know, even at that point, we didn't realize, I mean, nobody was a rock and roll star back then. You know, that term really hadn't become a catch-all. So once the 70s, you know, so we were still inventing everything, you know, and so that was very difficult being a band leader at that time. In the 70s, it had its own set of problems because then I was very successful and the band was successful. And then that had its own set of problems as a band leader. But the last 10 years, I've had the same band. Essentially, it's been a 4-piece, it's been a 3-piece, but I've had the same rhythm section: Pat DeSalvo, Garnet, Grimm, and then myself. And a lot of the last of the 10 years, I've just been a 3-piece, and it's been a very team effort. So all those years of the 60s and 70s struggling to keep a band together, and the 80s and 90s has led to a very calm period now the last 10 years, which is, you know, very nice.
We all need a little calm, no matter what we're doing, right? It's like, you're going to have tea, have a proper cup of tea, you know?
Right.
And we need that calm, and certainly knowing so many bands, so many acts, isn't it always the rhythm section that's the anchor? They're the heartbeat of what goes on. And when you've got, you know, your heartbeat set perfectly, then it makes life a lot easier. And when you think back to Rory Gallagher and, you know, Jerry McAvoy and paired up, did the same thing. And they're still, you know, a great rhythm section today. Some bonds are unbreakable.
Well, that's why with quite a few Savoy Brown lineups, when I was changing the band for one reason or another, I would often get a established rhythm section for the band. I did that in the 70s with the Chicken Shack rhythm section of Andy Sylvester and Dave Bidwell. You know, the Chicken Shack broke up, and I snagged the rhythm section, Dave and Andy's. So not Dave, Andy and Dave. They came in as a set rhythm section into the band. That was important. Later on in the 70s, you know, so I've always tried to, and of course with Pat nowadays with Pat and Garnet, they have played together for 30 years, you know, prior to joining Savoy Brown. So they were used to each other. So you're right about the rhythm section. And as I say, over the years, I've tried to get established rhythm sections when I was changing the band. And I was listening to an album from a few years ago, Voodoo Moon, the first album that Garnet and Pat played on. And I heard it at a record store in the background, so it came to me objectively. And I suddenly realized how good the rhythm section was.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that Pat and Garnet are making that record, you know.
I go back and hear things now from an album I thought I knew. And it's not because my ears are tuned any better than they were, but I think I have a greater appreciation having heard an awful lot of crap since I last played that album, you know. And I know it's terrible to say, but since the digital tsunami of music that hits me in every possible format, I have to wade through like I've fallen out of a dinghy going down the rapids. I've got to get back up to the surface to find the top 3% that may be worth listening to, and it makes it hard. But I think doing that means I have this appreciation. So we're going to play some music right now. So for those of you that are chiming in, it's album 41 for Savoy Brown called Ain't Done Yet, and we're going to kick off with a high-speed little track that's actually come out as a single called All Gone Wrong. And you and I are just going to tap along for a bit.
Oh, okay. I'll just bop along.
Yeah.
I won't dance because I'm not quite sure I'm not really a good dancer, but
we can't afford to pay you extra for that.
I won't tap dance. I'll click I can't even snap my. Oh yeah. A very weak snap of the fingers.
I stay alone. Most of the time I don't answer the phone. There's nothing here to make me smile. It's been this way for too long a while. I don't belong. Now you're gone. It's all gone wrong. It's all gone wrong.
Well, there you got a little taste of All Gone Wrong. And I think, is it the opening track? I don't have the album in front of me.
It's the opening track.
It is the opening track. Okay. But we're just leaving people passages so that they get an idea of what we're talking about, because, you know, they want to hear the whole album. You know, they got to get some plastic out, baby, you know. No, exactly. No cash, no flash.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's amazing what you can get from a 30-second, 1-minute clip. You know, I think music's got to hit you fast like that. You know, and I think that if you like something, you're going to know within a minute. If you know.
I think if you get to the passage that's relevant, which is what I've tried to do with this, is we give people 60 to 80 seconds of the passage that defines what that song is about. Maybe it's a chorus, maybe it's a lyric, maybe it's one of your solos. And
Okay.
that's why we're leaving those blanks in between, just to let the music play. Because I agree with you. I think, when you listen to as many things as I do, and let's face it, I think I can't imagine any Savoy Brown fan that is not of the caliber and an age. They don't have to be old. They could be 30 years old. They could be 80 years old. But they're the kind of people that know how to listen, and they've got good ear. And because that's what they're discerning is the Savoy Brown sound. And they will be able to pick up their favorite tracks, and everybody's favorite is going to be different, So, that will be something. But to me, the key that's noticeable is the factors, that go to make up the sound, not just of a blues band, but a British blues band. To me, there's a definition there in itself, that the band has that British sound, even in the blues. And then there's a subdivision within that is the Savoy Brown brand. There's a brand within that I think stands out. You are, in my opinion, what I'm listening to currently with the current album, there's a lot of very grunge type guitar and yet sweet solos. That's kind of typical. It's also typical to have very playful lyrics, and interesting playful lyrics, and yet they're delivered seriously, and they're delivered in a bluesy format. But it's a rock blues album, so it has this very relaxed attitude about it, which again is, to me, another British factor, and it's never overplayed. Whereas you do find in a lot of American rock blues bands, those two things are amped up, as we say. So that's what makes it so cool for me. I can pick out, your material. Even now, you've still stayed with the same brand all the way down the line. That's got to be hard to do.
It is. I'm constantly. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I get it wrong. But I'm constantly aiming for that, Savoy Brown sound. A lot of it does come from the guitar. When I do demos at home, I can play, I'll use electronic drums, I'll play bass and blah, 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 and I'll make a demo. And I might think, well, it's not so good, or I wonder about it. But as soon as I put the guitar on, the whole thing changes, So, and I'm not saying that immodestly. It's just a fact of the matter that the guitar sound and style and how I play, I think it puts a mark on it. And I've had great songwriters, great singers in the band, great rhythm sections we spoke before. But if I'm doing my part properly and playing the guitar as good as to my best ability, I find that knits everything together. There's been times over the 55 years that I haven't been playing so well, and I don't think the band has been the same. When I get to rehearsals with the band, I'm very serious about playing guitar. I have to come into rehearsals, motivated, and I have to have the guitar sound, because even now with Garnet, and Pat, again, the 10-year band together. If I come in and that guitar's not really clicking, there's no lead, there's no direction. Yeah. If I come in and that guitar's really got some energy and spark in, I can see in them, and we've been together for years, I can see suddenly they brought up, So a lot of it revolves around the guitar playing, and it's a question of me being committed to the guitar, really feeling the music. So a lot of the brand that you're talking about comes from the guitar. And then, of course, you have to have the songs. In my case, you talk about some gravity. I try to bring some seriousness, to the vocal. I try to have the song to be interesting. I love straight blues. I could play straight blues until the cows come home. It's my favorite my favorite music. I love Jimmy Reed, all the old stuff. But I think that when I'm playing the blues-based rock that I'm currently sort of experimenting more and more with, I want to say something different, so that when you do hear what is loosely called blues, it's a different take than you've heard before. It's progressive and I think exciting, and that's kind of what I like as well. Yeah, if I want to, most of the time I play old-fashioned blues, you know, for my own enjoyment at home every day. Jimmy Reed, Lowell Fulton, that kind of thing. But then I'll play, you know, the bluesy side of Bob Dylan quite a bit. I'll play the bluesy side of other artists. I'm always looking for blues in a different context. I could find it in Bob Dylan, I could find it in the Beatles in some of their songs, you know. But it's always got to have blues in it for me. I try to have a bit of the old time blues in, and I try to have a little bit of that contemporary feeling that I hear in you know, contemporary artists.
How do you know when you're not having the right vibe? You're not having a good day. You want to maybe go rest and come back, or coffee up and come back. Do one of the guys tell you? Are they brave enough to tell you, or do you know yourself?
Well, they're very, very sensitive, you know, and so they wouldn't say it outright to me. I think you know when the muse is not there, you know, and I think that I've learned after all of these years to relax. It's going to come back. I went through some in my 30s. That was being the 1980s. I went through a very up and down period with my guitar playing and with the muse in general. And there's been times through the 80s, but I completely lost the thread, you know. And so I have gone through those very down periods artistically. And even then, of course, I kept going, recording, writing. So I've gone through those down periods. So I kind of know. I don't get depressed anymore about that kind of thing. It doesn't last more than a few days. So if things are not, if I'm not getting any inspiration, I'll just let it go a few days, and it always comes back. You know, in the past I might have panicked, and then it goes on for months. You know, if you panic. No, I don't panic. It's just like, okay, this is just nothing's happening for me, and. But usually it's other musicians, it's other music.
Yes.
I think I can't, you know, I'm fed up with my guitar tone, and suddenly I'll hear somebody else and go, oh, yeah, you know, let me play with a little bit more, you know, treble or something, you know. Yeah. Suddenly, you know, you're not in a vacuum. I'm constantly listening to other music, that's where you get the inspiration from, you know. So sometimes, like you listen to so much music, and sometimes it's like, oh, there's nothing here that's doing it for me. And then suddenly an album comes, and it's like wonderful, you know. Now the door is open,
that's right. No, that's absolutely right. And I think it's also relevant. The more that you share, go and engage with other musicians, or play different music, or go to a live show. All of those things will knock off whatever is blocking the brain. And you're absolutely right. The more you sweat and worry about it, the longer it's going to go on. So I think we should, from now on, refer to you as the blues therapist, okay? If everybody follows your lead, the therapy will come through for whatever's bugging them. We're going to play another track now. We're going to play my favorite track. First track was about you, because it's your single. Second track is about me. My favorite track, number 6, Feel Like a Gypsy, because the pace of the song, we're going to slow it down a little. The solos are just gorgeous, but the content is something I relate to. And remember, the show is called, you know, Good Morning Blues, London to Louisiana. So here we've got everything tapped into one. And so we're going to play a passage from there. It's a little over 1 minute and 10 seconds, somewhere in the center, because it's a long piece. It's the passage I felt gave the most in a short period. So if you can hum it in your head, I'm going to shut up now.
I've got an easy mind, my troubles are gone. Listening to the night, I'm moving along. Here on my own, playing my guitar, getting lost in time, watching the southern star. I feel like a gypsy, a wandering son, sitting by the fire, feel like a gypsy.
All right, so you have a little passage there of Feel Like a Gypsy from the album Ain't Done Yet. And as we're about halfway through, the usual reminder to those of you that aren't familiar with the audio version of the program, Good Morning Blues, on 89.3 FM. If you are late, it will be a requirement that you get an email from my mother getting you permission to sign in and watch the video, because my mum rules, so we have to let her have her say. I forgot to mention to you the album cover. I mentioned the richness of the red, and the red goes great. There is one person who's not with us anymore who would absolutely love that cover, Mr. Alvin Lee, because his guitar would fit in there perfectly, and he'd be so jealous, you know. Actually,
It's amazing you just said that, because suddenly it sparked and I realized it could very easily be an Alvin Lee cover. Now you mention it, that's definitely his vibe.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I know
definitely...
Alvin from, I think it was 1968, I think. The first, we did a show at the Marquee Club in London, and 10 years after Savoy Brown. So what an incredible guitar player, you know. Oh,
I know, but also a wonderful human being, which makes it all so much more worthy. But yeah, that album cover has, if he were down here, he would steal that. He made a joke with me once and said, I was talking about a musician who put his back out, and he said, oh, he was probably bending up to pick over one of my notes that I dropped or something like that. He was the king of the one-liners in a live show. I interviewed him probably 3-4 times, and we were great phone buddies and swapped emails and stuff. But I hadn't seen him in many, many years. So, but the cover definitely is him. Going back to what you were talking about, is to get over whatever vibe was blocking and you needed more inspiration. That's another thing that makes this kind of special. 41 albums later, and the spread, the variety of the roots across this album really cover a lot of different genres and a lot of different styles. It's never predictable, it's never boring, but that same old thing has happened with a lot of Savoy Brown albums. For me personally, my ears, is that I really don't get into it until you're halfway through, and then something says, now that's the bit I've been waiting for. And it's always the same thing. I think it's tracks 5, 6, 7, 8. All of them jumped out at me, and one at the end. And then I go back and I listen again. I have to somehow tune in to the sound that I was anticipating. It's just me and my personal choice of songs. Like when I get to the middle, it takes off. And I just find that funny. I'm sure it's just me, but it really does. It happens all the time. It's just very odd. But that's why we've got a run of tracks, you know, from the middle towards the back end of the album.
And often when I listen to albums myself, I'll start from the last track and go the other way. I know I did that with talking about Bob Dylan previously. I had a Bob Dylan album, and I started it off, and I wasn't, I was enjoying it, and then for some reason, it was the first time I did it. I started on the 12th track, and I went 12, 11, 10, went back, and I got a different vibe altogether. And I often will do that. I'll play albums back to front. In fact, I've even done that with books, believe it or not. You know, with maybe it would have to be an autobiography or something, or a biography. Sometimes I'll start at the back and read the last chapter and something, then go to the front. I don't know what that is. So it just shows you that you don't have to. Nowadays, you have the shuffle. I think a lot of people listen to music, an album on a shuffle, kind of shuffle all thing. But it does show you that you don't have to be predictable in your own you know, being a musician, you shouldn't be predictable. And even as a listener, you don't have to be predictable. You know, just because it's 1 to 12, you don't have to do it that way. You can start wherever you want. As you say, with the Savoy Brown, you've often found from the middle on. So what you should do in future, the next Savoy Brown album, start from track 5.
Yeah, no, well, it's funny when you really like an album. Well, I am very bad about doing this. I obviously work from a lot of digital. I have the original format, sometimes only digital, but what I'm playing, you know, God forbid they should sell you a car today with a CD player in. Forget it. I haven't seen those in 5 years. So you have to have a USB stick to shove in. So I put all the albums that I've got to listen to on a stick, and my listening time a lot is in the car. No one can interfere. My phone is turned off. It's my little traveling chassis of whatever I want to hear. And it's odd because I will reorder most albums that come in. I will just put them the way I want to. But the other advantage of shuffle is if you really like, I've got one album that for me has been fantastic, driving evening music, going out with my wife, jazz album. And it's one of those things where I play it a lot. And it's Gordon Haskell, called The Cat That's Got the Cream. And it's one that I put on shuffle because if I don't, I will start singing the opening verse of the next song as soon as the other one's finished, because but by shuffling, it's, oh, surprise, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Which is a very...
Yeah, I also think that, you know, having said about the predictability, you know, sometimes you after all, an album is a product as well as an artistic statement, and often you do become predictable as, you know, putting an album together. Okay, we'll have to have, you know, something up tempo at the front, and then we have to do this. You know, sometimes it's difficult to make those decisions where you go, oh, I'm going to start with this really offbeat type of song, you know. So sometimes as an artist or a producer, you can go into your own, can go in your own way, you know. And I've often found that I've often thought, and many albums are sequenced wrong for my taste. You know what I mean? I would say, what if I did this? I would, you know, have it totally. But yeah, it's a very interesting subject.
We're gonna stop again and play a more conventional song, only because it fits into shuffle mode, which can be considered very American. I'm not dissing America. There's quite a lot more of that format, and we don't want to lose them with all this very intellectual blues. We're going to play a song, the title track, Ain't Done Yet. It's the 41st album from Savoy Brown, talking to Kim Simmonds about the content, how it was made, what it feels like, and how you get to the end of creating something like that. And the better thing we can do is share a bit with you. So have a little passage from track number 5, Ain't Done Yet. So that's the third piece of music there from the album, so that everybody gets a taste of the Kim Simmonds gumbo, all the different things that go into the melting pot that I don't think has ever spilled out something that was the same as the last one. I think it's always different. And I think whilst people know what the band means, and you're still representing, you're still sticking to what the band title was derived from. You know, Savoy, as in Savoy Records, meaning elegant, and Brown, you know, meaning everyday commonplace. It covers the gamut for everybody, but it isn't going to be the same thing, but it's going to taste the same. So that way, you kind of know what you're ordering on the menu, but it's got a little extra spice, maybe, or a little kick with the herbs, or something that changes and adds to it, but the baseline of the flavor is the same. And you know that's hard. 55 years of sticking to something that you still want to order off the menu. Not easy to do. You've got a body of work out there that I dare anybody to match.
Oh, that's you know, very nice to hear. It is hard, and at some certain parts of my career, I thought, you know, you can't say anymore. You know, you've said it all within a blues context. You know, I mean, there's only so many chords you can use. But I got over that hump, and I realized that it's infinite. You know, the ideas are infinite. The music's infinite. You know, when I'm gone, they'll still be doing playing this, blues rock, if you want to call it. Because blues rock, I think, covers everything. It covers the blues, the traditional blues, and the rockier side. I try to stay in the middle, and I try very hard to get the right kind of blend. You know, sometimes I get too rocking, sometimes I get too traditional. I think it's like a hybrid. If you can get it correct and in the middle, and the right blend of that blues and rock and roll, then it appeals to everybody. When I first started in gigging, really in 1966 is when I really started gigging. Champion Jack Dupree, the famous New Orleans,
oh yeah, very familiar.
Champion lived in England. Champion Jack lived in England at the time, and
he married a girl. He married a girl from Yorkshire.
Right, I met her, and so we would do gigs together. You know, I would go on first with Savoy Brown, and then Jack would come on, and we would back him up. And often, one occasion, it was in Eel Pie Island. I was standing in the audience with Jack. We were watching another act that were on the bill. And he turned to me and said, you know, this singer will never last. And I said, really? He said, well, he's not singing from his stomach, you know. And he would sort of give me some really good advice. And then he said to me, you know, as long as you play boogie woogie, you'll always make a living. And it's stuck with me ever since, you know. So really, that last track was a boogie track, you know. So I think, you know, boogie music, boogie woogie, it's still a heavy part of Savoy Brown. And I think Jack was right. If you can do it and you do it right, and it's part of who you are, you'll always make a living.
Did you ever travel in his old Austin Westminster?
I never did. No.
I have a picture somewhere. It's a big one, and he was so proud of it, standing next to it with Champion Jack Dupree in gold letters on the side of a black Austin Westminster, which is a big old car. Like his pride was glowing off the paintwork. But because in England we would consider that very gaudy, but not in America. So this is wonderful that we've talked about cars, because we're going to get into we've got about 3 minutes left to talk about. We can play the song afterwards, but let's at least talk about the song Jaguar, because I had one for 3 years. That was my goal. I wanted an XK8 convertible. It was blue with cream interior, the most gorgeous thing to cruise around in. Have you had one?
My brother had one of the original Jags, you know, the XKE. I can't remember what it was called now.
Yeah.
Back in the 60s. So I've driven one. I've been in one. I've been in his, you know.
Well, it's one of those things that when it's a goal and you get one, I kept going up in the light in the garage and looking around the door. And it's still there. Yeah.
You get in that car and you're James Bond.
It was crazy because after about 2.5 years, my brains kicked in. I said, I looked at the paperwork, how much I'm paying for this car, and said, okay, you've had your stupid years, now get rid of the bloody thing, which I did. But I will say I didn't forget the 2 years that I drove one. And for the next 13 years, I drove a Chrysler 300, which everybody called the gangster-mobile because the windows were all blacked out. It's a big car.
I like that. Nice car.
Yeah.
Right?
I had an empty violin case in the back window just to give you that vibe, you know. But anyway, the song Jaguar then came from what?
Well, I was looking for I was looking for a car song. This is a boogie song. I was looking for big red Cadillac, but it has been done. And I've always loved the Jaguar. I've never forgotten my brother's Jag. You see it in all the old British movies.
Yeah.
And so it was here was a song that's got some sensual side to it. There's a sensual side to the lyrics, and it's been done before, but I wanted to do it fresh. This wasn't going to be about a Cadillac. This was going to be about a UK car, the Jag.
Well, it's a great song, and it's the fourth track that we're playing. We bring the beat back up again. The fourth track from album 41 from An Amazing Career. It's called Ain't Done Yet, and you certainly aren't done yet. And I hope those that have watched and listened have enjoyed the content and have a much better inside impression of this album, and highly recommend that everybody go grab it while it's out there, especially the vinyl that Alvin wishes he had.